So for a lot of you guys, some of you might not know how I got introduced to Godzilla, how I became a fan, all that good stuff. So in this video, I just wanted to talk about basically how I first got started and basically to now. I was born in 1993, so that was like in the midpoint of the Heisei series as it was showing off. Now, of course, at the time, Godzilla was not readily available in the States. The only thing that we really had at the time was Trendmasters coming out. And if I remember correctly, when I was 2 years old, my dad told me that I first was introduced to Godzilla through the original film from 1954, although it probably was the American version, King of the Monsters. But I don't remember watching that film for the first time. The film that I remember the most, that I vividly remember watching for the first time, was Godzilla 1984. Again, probably the American version though, because obviously the Japanese version was definitely not available at that time. And I just remember watching this film so vividly we had like one of those big RCA TVs back in the day, if you remember. Like they were flat screens, but they had like that big back to them. And I just remember watching 84 and just seeing Godzilla for the first time, and just that suit and the roar and everything about it, the music and everything, it's just so nostalgic to me. And every time I watch that film, I feel like a kid again. And so seeing that for the first time and you know, probably also being 2 years old and watching King of the Monsters for the first time, it got me glued right away to the series. Again, since it was like the mid to late 90s, the internet really wasn't a thing as it is nowadays. So when I was growing up being a fan of Godzilla, I had no idea that the franchise was as expansive as it was at the time. I had no idea that the film had eras, the Showa era, now the Heisei era, and that the films were spanning since the 50s all the way up until the mid-90s. So I had no idea that Godzilla had multiple films at the time. I really only thought it was just the black and white film and 84. But it wasn't until you started going to Blockbuster and you started to go to all these other movie stores and you saw VHS tapes and you saw all these other Godzilla shows. And I also remember on TV, on the Sci-Fi Channel, they would have these like shows, I think it was called like Monster Madness or something, and they would have these marathons of Godzilla. And of course, with those, I watched a lot of Showa films, mainly the 70s. It was a lot of Godzilla vs. Hedorah, Godzilla vs. Gigan, Megalon. Those kind of films were shown a lot during those marathons. And I remember my dad and I would wake up early to record these on VHS tapes. We would, you know, make sure that we'd wake up super early, get the VHS tape in, and start recording so that I could have these movies on VHS. And then of course, being a kid and, you know, having toys, really the first few things I remember getting, probably, you know, a bunch of Spider-Man toys, Power Ranger toys, all that. But the Godzilla toys I remember a lot. And the first toy line that I remember getting was the Trendmaster figures. Now, I have a funny story with this guy actually, but I'll go into that later. But I do remember way back in the day, I would go to the old KB stores and in the malls. I remember running through the aisles trying to find the Godzilla section, and I would get it and I would see all of these Trendmaster figures. I'd see those 4-inch ones, the 6-inch ones, the big large scale guys. It blew my mind seeing these guys. And through Trendmasters, I found out a lot of other different Godzilla characters in different movies. I found a lot of different characters through the Trendmaster line. Like I had no idea who Space Godzilla was. I had no idea who Mecha Godzilla was. It was all this new stuff, and I wanted to learn so much about the series because of that. And so yeah, I collected a bunch of the smaller guys. I would beg my parents for that. And a really awesome memory I have, especially when it comes to Trendmasters, is this guy. This guy right here is the Trendmasters large-scale Godzilla. And I think originally he came with like armor. It was like silver pieces that he came with, but I don't have that anymore. And funny enough, this guy had sounds. You would hit this little button and he would roar, but this is pretty much what he sounds like now. Oh, nope, he doesn't even work anymore. I tried turning it on and it doesn't even work. So never mind, but he would roar back in the day. But the best thing I remember with this guy was actually, I remember going into a KB toy store and I remember seeing this guy on the shelf. And I remember just going to my parents, like, please, I want this guy. He's so cool, you know, please. And they said, no, not right now. We don't have enough money for him. And I was a little sad about that, but of course, you know, my parents were like, well, if you do your chores, we'll give you an allowance and we'll get him for you. So of course, throughout, I think it was like a week or two, and I was like super good boy. Like I was doing my chores, I was doing everything, I was, you know, doing everything my parents wanted me to do. So of course I was doing all my chores and I was doing everything that I needed to do. And came the time where my parents were like, all right, let's get in the car, let's go to the mall, and let's go get this guy for you because you've been so good. And I was super stoked, super excited. And we went to the toy store and I ran up, and of course, all sold out. They did not have this guy on the shelf anymore. He was gone, completely sold out. And my parents were like, oh no, like what are we gonna do? We just promised our little boy that we'd get him this Godzilla figure, and he's nowhere to be found. So basically, long story short, my parents had to go through a lot of hurdles and hoops and hurdles to get this guy, and I've had him in my collection for ever since I was a little boy. I mean, I don't remember the exact age I was, but I was probably like maybe 6 or 7 years old. So yeah, again, the internet was starting to become more of an accessible thing at that time in the late 90s. So that's when my parents finally got it and we were able to log on. Do you guys remember AOL? You'd log on and it'd be like that horrible sound playing in the background. And then also you had to make sure that no one was on the phone, because if someone was on the phone, it would kick you off the internet. And it's good times, right? Good times. So going on the internet, I found just the whole world of Godzilla at that time. I remember going on sites for looking at toys and finding out movies. That's when I learned about the whole Showa series. That's when I learned about the Heisei series with Godzilla vs. Biollante. I didn't even know Biollante was a thing until I found it on the internet. I was like, whoa, what is this movie? You know, I looked at the poster and it was like, wow, that's awesome. One of the sites I remember the most when it came to the figure collecting was actually a place called Chibi Godzilla Toys. And that site had a plethora of just Godzilla toy information and all that. I think also Clawmark Toys was another website I would go to just to, you know, figure out like what kind of toy lines there were. That's when I started to find out what Bandai was. Is when I found out like what little high grade figures are. So my knowledge with Godzilla was starting to I was starting to learn more about the franchise and just continuing to get more involved in it. So then of course the 90s were wrapping up, and one of the biggest things in terms of Godzilla was Godzilla 1998, of course. And I remember all of the marketing at the time. I remember the campaign when it came to Taco Bell, and like the semis that had like, oh, his foot's as big as this semi, or the posters, his eyes as big as this poster, or this, you know, the big billboard or something. Like, I just remember seeing Godzilla everywhere, and I was super, super excited about it. And then I remember when I saw it in theaters, I mean, as a little kid, I wasn't super critical on movies, and I didn't really know any better, and so I did enjoy the film as a kid. But there was a little part of me though that did feel that it was a little off from the Japanese Godzilla, of course. But then of course I didn't have to wait too long, because literally 2 years later we got Godzilla 2000, and I was like super enthralled with that. I remember seeing that. I vividly remember seeing Godzilla 2000 in theaters for the first time, and that was such a treat, because that was my very first Japanese Godzilla film that I was able to see in theaters. So pretty much from there, you know, the early 2000s, I was just continuing to be a fan, following up with the series. That's when the Millennium series started to come out, and I still was not as knowledgeable with the series, so I didn't know that then, since, you know, all of a sudden every year a new Godzilla movie was coming out, because in the States we weren't getting the films right away. We were getting them like a year later. And even then, it was still hard to get those films. But it wasn't until TriStar got the rights, you know, from doing 1998, that they were able to distribute some DVDs. So I remember having a bunch of Godzilla DVDs that I think it was like the 50th anniversary movies that had a bunch of Showa films and all that, and some of the Heisei films. They had like the dual movies, like I think it was Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah and Mothra, that was on like one disc. But the weirdest thing I remember with those movies, if you guys ever have those discs, remember when you'd open it up, it would be one disc, and then they put both movies on one disc, but it was on both, like one side was King Ghidorah and the other side was Mothra, and so you'd have to be careful when you're putting it in, because you'd get all fingerprints messed up on it and it would ruin the disc. And that was like one of the worst like ideas that they ever had. Like, why not put two discs? Ugh, anyways. So I remember those. That's when like DVDs were starting to become a thing, and I started to collect Godzilla movies on DVD, and that was like my main goal. I wanted to be able to get every single Godzilla film on DVD. So with the power of the internet, I was scouring the places on like eBay. If any of you guys remember iOffer, that was another site that I went to find a lot of films, and one of them was 1984, of course, and I think it was 1984, Biollante, and Megalon that just were not available at all. And I think those ones I got bootlegs from. And I remember 84 I got off of iOffer, and it was a basically a VHS rip just put onto a DVD, and that was kind of crap. But I also remember when I discovered what region lock stuff was. And I remember buying a Region 3 Hong Kong Godzilla 1984 disc DVD, and I just remember the disappointment that when I bought it I was super excited, and I put it into my DVD player and it was like, sorry, can't play this, it's a different region. I was like, well, great, now I just have a paperweight because I can't do anything with the DVD. And then going on that, 2002 introduced Bandai Creation, and that was a huge thing for me. Treadmasters obviously was pretty much dead at this point in the early 2000s, and I remember going into, I can't remember exactly what the store was because I don't think KB Toys was still around. It was probably Toys R Us or something. But I remember actually finding this little guy right here, the Rainbow Mothra from Bandai Creation. This is actually from 2002. This is the original Rainbow Mothra from the Bandai Creation line, Wave 1. And I was like, oh, this is so cool, because obviously the figures were more accurate to the films. And so then I just started collecting Bandai Creation, and that was like I was addicted to that. I was like, oh, I gotta get all these figures. And some of them just I couldn't get, like Mechagodzilla was never available. I remember when like Wave 4 or 5, when Final Wars was out, like I could not find a Godzilla Final Wars character. I remember getting Rodan and Ingers pretty easily. I can't remember the other character. Oh, I think it was Gigan. Yeah, Gigan was another hard find. And then of course when it came to video games, obviously the Pipeworks trilogy was coming out. 2002 we got Destroy All Monsters, and 2004 Save the Earth. And with Destroy All Monsters, I have a really fun story that I remember going to GameStop, or at the time I think it was called EB Games, and I remember seeing Godzilla Destroy All Monsters on the shelf, and I was like on GameCube, and I wanted to get it so bad. And I had to save up all my pennies. Back when games were $50 new, if you guys remember that. And I just remember, once again, saving up, doing chores, and then going to EB Games or GameStop and buying the game, bringing it home and playing it. I just loved that time, just playing Godzilla Destroy All Monsters for the first time. But with Unleashed, I remember actually following that game since it was like announced. I remember seeing an old IGN video that had a trailer of it that first was like a preview. And I remember going onto the Godzilla Unleashed website every day after school, and I would look at the player cards and I would see like what new characters they would unveil, and it was just the most exciting thing. And then when Unleashed finally came out, I remember it was actually, I had a GameFly subscription. If any of you guys remember GameFly, it was a rental service. I don't even know if they're still around. But I actually remember the first time playing Godzilla Unleashed was actually through GameFly. I didn't actually go out and buy the game. I actually rented it from GameFly. And of course, you know, you guys know my opinions on Unleashed. I played it and I was a little disappointed, but it was still cool. It was still a memory. And then really that was kind of it. I just continued being a fan of Godzilla. I eventually found out, I think it was like in 7th grade, so like either 2006 or 2007, I actually found out that Godzilla Final Wars was the final film in the whole series, and that actually came out in 2004, so I was a little bit behind. I was like, what? Like, I thought it was a 2007 film, and I thought Godzilla was still going, but nope. And then of course we got the rumors of the Godzilla 3D IMAX movie, which didn't go anywhere, but that ended up turning out to be, you know, Godzilla 2014. And there was also that fan film, Godzilla 0 Hour, that was with Godzilla vs. Gamera, and that was a disappointment because that fell apart. I don't even really remember what happened to that film. And then throughout the 2000s, it was just that was it. I just continued to collect Godzilla movies and merchandise. I did eventually end up having a complete collection of the Godzilla movies on DVD, or still at the time you couldn't get all the movies, you know, that were officially licensed by Toho. And then 2013 came around, and well, I started Goji Fan, and then from there it was just, you know, a huge thing of me being a fan of Godzilla, and that is history that we all know. So that is basically my long-winded story about me becoming a Godzilla fan, and just my history on how I got started and where, you know, just my fun memories and all that. So I just wanted to share my memories about, you know, becoming a Godzilla fan as a kid, and that was pretty much it.